Welcome to the Debt Crisis Problem Podcast, your source for insights into major risk events that could trigger an economic downturn and debt crisis. Today we're addressing another key risk, U.S. government default. Our goal is to create risk awareness and spark a healthy debate for the average citizen. The world is too fragile to wait. We need fresh candor and common sense. A debt crisis looms due to unsustainable debt and deficit spending everywhere. It's time to wake up and speak up. Let's get started. The U.S. debt limit look back from the U.S. Department of the Treasury as of December 2023. It says, the debt limit is the total amount of money that the U.S. government is authorized to borrow to meet its existing legal obligations, including Social Security and Medicare benefits, military salaries, interest on the national debt, tax refunds, and other payments. The debt limit does not authorize new spending commitments. It simply allows the U.S. government to finance existing legal obligations that Congresses and presidents of both parties have made in the past. Failing to increase the debt limit would have catastrophic economic consequences. It would cause the U.S. government to default on its legal obligations, an unprecedented event in American history. That would precipitate another financial crisis and threaten the jobs and savings of everyday Americans, putting the United States right back into a deep economic hole just as the country is recovering from the recent recession. Congress has always acted when called upon to raise the debt limit. Since 1960, Congress has enacted 78 separate times to permanently raise, temporarily extend, or revise the definition of the debt limit. 49 times under Republican presidents and 29 times under Democratic presidents. Congressional leaders in both parties have recognized that this is necessary, unquote. Let's stop pretending the U.S. government isn't broke, shall we? It seems there's a little game being played with the debt ceiling debate with the U.S. Congress. First, there is a spirit of great division and contention over spending. Maybe it's all about wielding power and control. The debt ceiling is being used to control spending, but only spending previously approved in Congress, so why not just increase it? And when new politicians come on the scene, they can see that all the spending is driving the U.S. off a financial cliff and seek to put the brakes on before disaster strikes. But uncontrolled deficit spending keeps happening, regardless of what administration is in power. There is no real budget and no real self-control in spending. It's a spending free-for-all. Quite the game, right? And the debt ceiling debate rages on. Everyone pretending that the U.S. government is not essentially insolvent and needs to avoid what really is a fake default. So now they argue for a 79th increase to the debt limit in order to keep funding the U.S. government, prevent another credit downgrade, avert a financial crisis, avoid a U.S. government shutdown, no national default, escape a loss of confidence in the U.S. and its dollar, etc. If a default were to happen, the shock would be felt around the world. Who would do business with the United States? Under what conditions would it do so? At what price? What trust would there be in the U.S. by investors? How many jobs would be lost? Would yours? Would the economy stop growing? Would interest rates not have to increase? What would happen in the stock market and with household wealth? If the world loses confidence that the U.S. cannot pay its debt, what will happen to financial markets throughout the rest of the world? So get a clue and just increase the debt limit, right? We did it 78 times in the past, and one more isn't going to hurt anyone, right? After all, if you do not increase the debt limit, there will also be more political gridlock, a U.S. government shutdown, and all manner of economic disruption. So what are you waiting for? Do you see anything wrong with this picture? As to you, whatever your so-called budget is, if you had massive debt and deficit spending on an equal proportion to the U.S. government debt and spending levels, you'd be completely insolvent and 100% broke. Only you can't print your own money. digging deeper into the U.S. debt ceiling crash landing debate. The same debate, regardless of party, is regularly at center stage in the Congress. Each party seems to go back and forth to suit their political needs. The entire debate has become politicized. There seems to be a perpetual argument for reasons to not raise the debt ceiling and control spending, being at the unsustainable levels, versus simply having to raise the limit on already approved funding to avoid a default. Nothing is likely to come to a compromise, like living within a budget, so there will be no need to have a debt ceiling debate ever again. So what options really exist? Absent purposely letting the U.S. government go into default by not extending the debt ceiling, because it's insane to have uncontrolled spending and just go over a cliff, and still many don't care at all and will forever deficit spend. The debate will continue back and forth until the debt monster finally becomes overwhelmingly, unmistakably, a full-blown debt crisis that will crash upon us. This short ad is sponsored by the TunaBudget.com podcast. Hey friends, looking to improve your personal and family financial wellness? Don't miss the Tuna Budget podcast at TunaBudget.com. Download your free Tuna Budget Worksheet Plan, the most powerful budget worksheet plan in the world, yours. In addition, dozens of Tuna Budget's human side candid conversation memos may be the perfect answers you're looking for. Join us for real candid conversation and candid questions that can change your life for the better. Subscribe to the TunaBudget.com podcast and empower yourself to take charge of your future and financial well-being. People must be thinking it's still better to have a more controlled default, like trying to land a 747 jet airliner on the freeway versus avoiding a full-blown crash into the mountainside at full speed. Is there really even any difference in trying to control a default, a freeway landing, by not extending the debt ceiling, or just let a major default crisis happen, a mountainside crash? What landing approach makes the most sense to you? The members of Congress you elected have to make these decisions for you. Indeed, they are making these decisions in your behalf right now. In the end, at some point, common sense says elected officials will not manage the nation's finances with a balanced budget, which cannot even work at this point. That is exactly the reason no one will insist on a budget. If the U.S. government lived within their means, taxes collected and balanced spending, the economy would stall out because it is structured and addicted to all the spending. It can't be stopped at this point without a crisis. The forces, in trouble if you do and in trouble if you don't, will only ensure one thing. While the debt ceiling debate rages on, the pile of debt just keeps increasing, regardless of party. In other words, we can almost certainly expect a mountainside event in the near term. Nobody will do the right thing, like have a budget, because they want to cling to power. Too many are there in Congress to serve themselves and not the best interests of the people. Or maybe they are serving the people and giving them what they do want. More debt spending, budget be darned. The net result of the debt ceiling debate is always just pushing the airplane to the highest speed possible as it gets closer and closer to the mountainside. The spending and debt levels are unsustainable. It means the plane will eventually crash into the mountainside because unsustainable means that the airplane is unmaintainable, untenable, unmanageable, unjustifiable, indefensible, weak, unsound, shaky, and flawed. It portends a disaster, or simply put, a default and a debt crisis. Don't believe it? Would you get on board such a plane? Sorry, but if you're a U.S. citizen, you are on that airplane already. And it's not slowing down. In fact, it's still picking up speed. In conclusion, so what, when, and how will this risk affect you? When the musical chairs games stops. When a given country defaults on its debt repayments, its central bank will print and borrow more money to cover its expenses, which leads to higher inflation and higher interest rates. In modern times, many countries have experienced debt crises, but when the U.S. government defaults on its debts, it will take the global economy to new low places. Global debt restructurings will need to take place, which can take several years to negotiate and finalize. Think of seasons of financial forest fires. The standard of living will shrink as people are forced to live within their means, including drastic cutbacks in U.S. government spending and services. Renegotiated debt repayments with the terms with its creditors will need to take place. Emergency funding from international organizations will be given with low interest rates and the expectation of repayment, and the new debt may not even be repaid either. Debts will end up being repaid over a longer period or be written off or written down to reduce the amount owed. Debt repayment negotiations will be very difficult and complicated due to the lack of transparency of even who all the creditors are. Like a person who borrows money from many places, so do countries. Creditors will be unable to determine if they are sharing equally in what comes to giving concessions. Stakeholder parties will have a hard time even agreeing on the financial condition of the country needing debt restructuring. As protracted negotiations play out, the burden will negatively affect banks, consumers, investors, businesses, and especially the poorest people. To survive, businesses will have to cut expenses and staff personnel, resulting in higher unemployment. Services will be disrupted in key industries, including essential services like health care. One quick sign will be neighborhoods and roads that become even more unsafe and in disrepair. Checkmate conclusion. In short, we are in trouble if we do extend the debt limit, and in trouble if we do not. That is the point. We will be having a debt crisis in the near term. How can we not? The level of soaring deficit spending is out of control, susceptible to be even more debt than the 20 risks in the debt crisis podcast. The deficit spending and debt levels are not sustainable, as default conditions are only increasing daily. If you do not increase the debt limit, you're just going to start the default period within weeks of the debt ceiling expiration date, a freeway landing. If you increase and extend the debt limit, you are just postponing the inevitable, the mountainside crash. But once it is extended, just like in the past, people won't see any immediate default coming, so they'll go back to the let's let the party begin mode. But no, we don't even want to have a real conversation and hold people accountable about repayment default risk, because it is time to get back to the football game and the grill, right? Life is good until the party suddenly stops or is disrupted and people are caught unprepared and the musical chairs disappear. That is what's coming, and frankly, we the people will get the consequences of our choices when it comes to the burden of overwhelming debt. The day of reckoning will soon come enough as a complete shock to most people. Then comes the fighting, the blaming, the contention, and so forth. We the people, we who should have known better, will be naked when the time comes out, when the tide goes out, embarrassed and hopefully full of shame. Others will be wandering around upset, confused, dazed, and perplexed because they didn't see it coming. Most will likely panic, and some will act dumb or innocent for having been caught being heavily in debt. In a sense, the world will change, and financially speaking, it will be game over for a great many people. Natural consequences and accountability will always come. The books always balance. Touch a hot stove and you'll be burned. Can you smell a debt crisis yet? Thank you for joining us. Today we explored the U.S. government default, a major risk contributing to the looming debt crisis. We hope to highlight the urgent need for transparency around these risks. We want to hear from you. Submit your own debt crisis memo and share your thoughts at tunabudget.com. If you found today's episode useful, please subscribe for future podcasts. Your support helps us grow this healthy debate. Until next time, take all necessary precautions. Your financial wellness matters. Thanks again.